10, 9, ignition sequence start. All engines are running.
Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And it is time for the Big 3-0. That's episode 30, the best of Kerbalcast. Duh! And yes, best is a relative term. NOS is on an EVA this week, so we're going to look back at the past 29 episodes. Some of our skits, some of our funnier bits, and also our two most popular space history segments. On the Plane at Hadley, our look at Apollo 15, and the truth about Gus Grissom.
Shall we begin?
It is the very first podcast devoted exclusively to Kerbal Space Program, and I am Biff Aldrin. I am your LMP, also known as your Lunar Module Pilot, and with me, my Command Module Pilot, my CMP,
Nostromo.
We need to start out with an announcement. We are now on YouTube. Thanks to a user by the name of Ascalon. He has been asking us for some time to post our podcast on YouTube. He is deaf, and he's a big fan of the game, and he's always wanted to enjoy the podcast. And YouTube has built-in speech recognition software,
Yeah,
so it will
auto captioning.
Yeah, it'll automatically add closed captioning. And I have been trying to figure out, because you can't just post audio to YouTube.
Yeah.
There has to be some kind of video, even if it's just a static image. But I had been trying to figure out how to do that. And he said to me, listen, I know how to do it. I just need your permission to do it. And so we created an account for him. And he's been uploading previous episodes of the podcast. And I went in. Have you looked at these yet?
No, not yet.
I went in. I was real curious to see how the closed captioning, what kind of a job it was doing.
Yeah.
And so I clicked on episode 1, and I happened to get, back in episode 1, I talked about how one of my highlights, one of the high points of my life was I got to meet and interview Jim Lovell. And I was telling that story. That was the section that I clicked on. And I was reading the closed captioning.
Oh,
now,
no.
I will say,
no.
considering the amount of crosstalk and considering the fact that we're throwing around a lot of terminology that isn't common.
Yeah, and made up words.
Yeah, it does a pretty good job.
Nice.
But
Uh-oh.
let's just say that we have our very own all your base or belong to us. I transcribed this. This is my Jim Lovell story from episode 1. Word for word, the closed captioning. You ready?
Okay.
Okay, quote. Jim Lovell was on Apollo 8, which was the first mission to ever leave. It was the first time human beings ever left the Earth and went to another body in space. So they went around the men, and they did it without the lunar module. So it's a good thing what happened on Apollo 13 didn't happen on Apollo 8. But that was a very risky mission going around the man with just one engine. But I remember meeting him. And that net kind Obama's contact high you can get. I was walking around for a week saying, Homer to your mobile. The real funny part was, I have a copy of the book, A Man on the Man. Buy and urge I can. Okay, well, Jim Lovell has written a book himself called Lost Man, which years the book that they based the movie Apollo 13 on. I get out this hardcover Man in the Man, and there's this little split second where I can see his baseball, where it's like, hey, dummy, that's not my book. That's the closed captioning. You're turning red.
They're gonna... Oh, man.
We're probably going to get kicked off for obscenities.
Yeah.
Apparently, after meeting Jim Lovell, I walked around for a week saying Homer to your mobile. Do you know what's weird? Do you know what the speech recognition software is trying to interpret with Homer to your mobile? I met Jim Lovell.
Oh.
Somehow or the other, I met Jim Lovell sounds like Homer to your mobile.
You know what's funny is whenever that gets transcribed, you're just going to be saying Homer to your mobile over and over again. Homer to your mobile comes across as Homer to your mobile. And like, well, duh.
Well, duh. Yeah, and apparently I saw his baseball.
Okay, so our podcast gets downloaded pretty much all over the world.
Yeah, we are, the podcast service that we use breaks it down by geography.
Yeah.
And we're not in every country, but we are pretty much on every continent. And we're able to go through and see which areas download us the most. And right at the very end of the list, there's just a handful of areas.
Yeah, like a couple one-offs.
Yeah, where we have literally one listener. And we decided we wanted to do, we just kind of picked one at random.
Yeah, we're going to take you on an adventure there.
We wanted to thank the one listener because, we know that, that this is like one of those awful secrets. Like if everybody else knew that you were listening to us, you'd probably be ostracized and, chased home from school and beaten up and stuff. So we appreciate your courage listening to us. And so we want to thank our one listener in American Samoa. And we want to thank you, and we want to kind of teach everybody a little bit. If you don't know about American Samoa, we found this educational film, and we want you to hear this.
History for schools, take 8.
Well, the music's nice.
Oh, thanks. I didn't do it.
American Samoa, one of the loveliest spots in all the Pacific, a place of rare beauty, of constantly changing scenery, of happy people. There are 5 volcanic islands here, mountainous islands with a total area of 76 square miles.
I'm sorry, this is all in black and white.
Oh, it's not just me?
No, this is older than I thought.
Where'd you get a projector?
It came with the rental. You had to blow the dust off of it, though.
Do they have to be gas-powered?
Yeah.
But there are 2 Samoas, American and Western. Today they're linked by air with regular services operating from the international airport near the capital of American Samoa, Pago Pago. So let's fly to explore the delights of the other island.
Oh, yes, let's do. I think the airplane had just been invented.
I never hang up
Far
Pango.
away are reminders of a
Do you
time of
hokey
past.
pokey?
The tombs of the chiefs who ruled these islands before and after the white man arrived.
What?
And among the white men who lived here was one of the most famous English writers, Robert Louis Stevenson.
Did he
The
just...
people here used to call him Tusitala, which means teller of tales.
It means old whitey. Did he just say white man?
Yeah, I think it just went there.
Oh, this is so old.
The Samoans loved him, and although he was very ill during his last few years, he constantly fought for their rights. And before he died, he wrote this poem. Under the wide and
Go get
starry
help, I'm
sky,
dying.
dig the grave and let me lie.
They were dictating.
Glad did I live and gladly die.
Go to the castle,
Even with
Arg.
the will. The people erected a plaque to his memory, and they cut a road
Erected.
through the bush and trees to bury him on the summit of Mount Via. They called the track they made the Road of Loving Hearts.
I thought it was Robert Louis
Home is the
Stevenson.
sailor,
It's now a parking garage.
home from sea, and
Reverential.
the hunter home from the hill.
Okay,
This
go
one
ahead.
comes from Thomas Eccles. Hey guys,
Hey.
I've made a trailer for Kerbalcast.
They traveled to Duna, the reddest planet in the Kerbal system, where skill is everything and failure is not an option. This year, get ready to ride a rocket to the stars with Kerbalcast.
Oh, cool. I want to see
Yeah.
see that movie. Gus Grissom flew the second suborbital mission. The first was Alan Shepard. Second was Gus Grissom. And then the third was John Glenn, and he flew the first American orbital missions, okay? Gus Grissom, his flight went fine. Splashdown went fine. While he was sitting there waiting for the helicopter to hook onto his capsule, his hatch blew. It was loaded with explosive bolts, and the hatch blew, and the capsule sank. Now, the movie portrays it as Gus Grissom was panicking, and he blew the hatch by accident, or however you want to put it. But the book and the movie both portray Gus Grissom as panicked and at fault for blowing the hatch. Now, if you look at the historical record, that's not true. The movie is
Okay.
beholden to the book. So obviously they kind of went to that source material. But what I wanted to do here is I wanted to kind of walk through the difference between the movie and the real life. And I'm going to start with, these are mission recordings of Gus Grissom's flight. And you do not hear the sound of somebody panicking. Okay? I'm going to do the real life missions, and then I'm going to do bits from the movie. This is Gus Grissom on takeoff, and the name of his spacecraft was Liberty Bell 7.
Ignition. Liftoff. Roger, this is Liberty Bell 7. The clock is operating.
All right, so this is the part where Gus Grissom begins his reentry, and this is where you can hear what the effects of the G-force is building up. It's like having an elephant sit on your stomach.
Okay, the G's are starting to build. Roger. G's are building. We're up to 6. There's 9. There's about 10. And the handle is off in one direction. There I got a little pitch rate coming back down to 7. Okay, the altimeter is actually at 65. There's 60. Okay, I'm getting some contrails, evidently a shock wave. 50,000 feet, I'm feeling good. Feeling very good. Everything is fine. 45,000, do you still read?
Okay, I'm going to ask you at this point, does that sound like somebody who's panicking?
No, that sounds like somebody who's like competently handling,
right,
what they're doing.
Last clip I'm going to play from Gus Grissom. This is Liberty Bell 7 has hit the water. He is floating there, waiting for the helicopter to come and latch on. He is going through his checklist. Now, because he's actually in the water, there's a lot more interference and the sound quality goes down considerably. But this is Gus Grissom in Liberty Bell 7 before the hatch blows. He's in the water and he's communicating. You can also hear the helicopter. He's communicating with the helicopter.
I want you to give me how much longer will be before you get there. This is plus one. We're in orbit now this time. Around the Roger, give me about another 5 minutes here to mark these switch positions before I give you a call to come in and hook on. Are you ready to come in and hook on anytime? This is plus one. Roger, we're ready anytime you are. Okay, give me about another 3 or 4 minutes here to make these switch positions, and I'll be ready for you.
It's kind of hard to hear what he just said there, but he's saying that he's going to mark all the switch positions, and what he's talking about is he's got a checklist and a grease pencil, and he's going to go down the checklist and mark all the switch positions. And when they found the craft on the ocean floor years later, they actually found that checklist, and he was, I don't know if I'd say halfway through it, but he was working his way through it when the hatch blew. Now, again, does that sound like somebody who's panicking?
No, I think in a state of panic, I probably would have eaten the grease pencil.
There you go. Now, this is the movie's version of it, and I have the movie doesn't actually show the suborbital hop. What they show, they pick it up with the landing. Listen to the panic in this man's voice.
Are you ready to come in and hook on at any time?
This is Hook 1, Roger. This is Hook 1. Just waiting for your okay to come in and hook on. Over.
If you're ready for me to blow the hatch, I'll have to take my helmet off.
Say again, Liberty Bell. Just waiting for your okay to come in and hook on. Liberty Bell, say again. This is Hook 1, waiting for your okay.
Okay, now that was audio from the movie, The Right Stuff. Fred Ward was playing Gus Grissom, and as you can hear, he's very panicky, and he's basically begging the helicopter to come hook on. And you can see that he's sweating, his eyes are red, full-blown panic, and the movie gives you the impression that he blows the hatch. The way the movie sums it up, Gus Grissom saying that the explosive hatch just blew. When he leaves the room, there is an unnamed accident investigator who says this.
Explosive hatches have been on jet fighters for 10 years. The damn things have been run inside out, subjected to trial by heat, by water, by shaking, pounding. We even dropped them from a height of 100 feet onto concrete, and not one of them has ever just blown.
After that, the book goes on to say, but far from having a tarnished record, Grissom was a hero. He was back solidly in the rotation for whatever great flights might come up in the future, as if by magic. Now, what the book does not mention at this point is Gus Grissom. NASA did an investigation, and they cleared him. Now, here's where I give the movie credit that I don't give the book. The book portrays Chuck Yeager and the other test pilots, the true brethren, as being very dismissive of Gus Grissom. He blew it, and he got away with it. The movie actually adds a scene that's not in the book. This is Chuck Yeager talking to the true brethren.
You think a monkey knows he's sitting on top of a rocket that might explode? These astronaut boys, they know that, see? I'll tell you something. It takes a special kind of man to volunteer for a suicide mission, especially when it's on TV. Oh, Gus, he did all right.
Well, let's go ahead and move on. Now, we have another letter, and this one is related to a story segment we did in the program last week.
Yeah, on episode 3, in our But I Digress segment, we talked about the portrayal of Gus Grissom in The Right Stuff. Whenever we're working on the podcast, the thing we try to do is we try to keep from being long-winded in any section, and we felt like the Digress segment had gone on for a lot longer than the others, and so we decided to trim it down, because first off, it's not Kerbal related.
Right.
So we want it to still be there for entertainment's sake, but we also want it to be brief.
Right. So what we did was we took out some of the flight to ground audio. We shortened some of it we just took completely out. And also there was an epilogue that we talked a little bit past The Right Stuff. And at that point we felt like we had just gone on too long, so we went ahead and took it out. We got a letter from Scott from Virginia, and he basically said what our epilogue was.
Yeah, it was really nice to hear from him. Scott said, "I'm glad you cleared up the story on Gus Grissom, since it is one that I became very fascinated with after seeing The Right Stuff, which is still one of his favorite movies. However, I was wondering if you were aware that the unfortunate incident with the hatch on Liberty Bell 7 was indirectly responsible for Grissom's premature demise. After having investigated the incident and concluding that Grissom was not responsible for the hatch blowing, the NASA engineers decided to redesign the hatch for the Apollo program by removing the bolts, changing it to be inward opening in order to prevent the Liberty Bell incident from repeating while in the vacuum of space. As I'm sure you know, Gus Grissom was tragically killed during a test of the Apollo 1 command capsule, along with fellow astronauts Ed White and Roger Chaffee. As pointed out in the second episode of HBO's excellent docudrama series From the Earth to the Moon, if they hadn't removed the explosive bolts from the hatch design following the Liberty Bell 7 incident, the 3 astronauts may have lived."
Now, see, I am glad that he wrote that in, because that is, honestly, that is more succinct and to the point than what we were talking about last week.
Yeah.
And it's actually shorter.
Yeah. Yeah, we... If we did the podcast uncut,
yeah,
you would probably get, an extra 30 minutes of unnecessary details.
Right.
And probably an extra hour of not very good jokes.
Right. And us laughing at him, too.
Yeah.
But Scott from Virginia wrote in, and what I wanted to do, what he's talking about, From the Earth to the Moon, we actually had a clip from that show that we ran and then took out for time. And since Scott has given us the chance to do so, I want to go ahead and play this. This is an unnamed accident investigator, and he's talking to Frank Borman, astronaut Frank Borman, and this is in the aftermath of the fire, the Apollo 1 fire.
You know what haunts me? In a way, if it wasn't for me, the fire might not have been fatal.
Why is that?
Capsules in the Mercury program had explosive hatches, right? You pull a lever and bam, you're out of there in a second. Remember when Gus's capsule sank and everyone said he must have blown the hatch by accident? I was on the review board for that. I was the one who found out Gus was telling the truth. The hatch could blow by itself. It was because of that they decided not to use an explosive hatch with Apollo. Nice irony, huh? If I hadn't proved Gus right, we might have had an explosive hatch on this spacecraft, in which case Gus and the boys would still be alive and well. I'm not a big fan of irony.
Once again, that's From the Earth to the Moon. That's a little soundbite that we originally had in last week's episode, but cut it out for time. Thanks to Scott from Virginia, we were able to sneak it back in and hopefully set the record straight about Gus Grissom. And now, another edition of As the Kerbin Turns.
Honey, I'm home.
Hello, dear. How was your day?
Oh, same as always. We were trying to prove Dr. Haslein's theory of time, and I ended up on a planet ruled by talking apes. The rocket exploded on the launch pad, and I burst into flames. My ship broke apart in the atmosphere, and I plummeted to my death. My descent stage ran out of fuel, and I left a smoldering crater on the surface of the Mun. My ship got stranded in orbit, so I had to kill and eat one of the crew just to survive. We landed on an alien planet, and a xenomorph burst out of my chest. The onboard computer went crazy, and I got sucked into some kind of star portal. Say, who's that old guy standing in the corner? He kind of looks like me.
Tune in next time for another edition of As the Kerbin Turns.
Ooh, yeah. It was a good one.
I don't get it. Are you ready for this week's Beginner's Minute?
Let's do it.
I know you hate these.
No, okay. So Beginner's Minute is I'm given a question, and I don't know what the question is.
Right.
And I have 1 minute it's not edited. I have 1 minute to answer that question, and all the while I am being antagonized by my co-host.
Yes, I go out of my way to distract him in every way possible. I give him a question, I play the music, he's got exactly 1 minute before the buzzer sounds, and I do everything I can think of to throw him off.
And then, there's
you just have to imagine what that is.
And I just have to wait for the buzzer.
Yeah. Saved by the buzzer.
I have to run the clock.
Okay. Well, this week, I'm actually going to give you a fairly easy one, okay? Okay. Obviously, the update came out this week, and that's kind of the theme of our program.
Yeah.
We're talking about first contract.
Yeah, first contract.
Your question for Beginner's Minute is, what's new in the update?
The first big update is they took it to 64-bit, so everything runs smoother and looks a little bit nicer. There are contracts where you make money. So like you go to this little building that's in between the like construction areas, and you can ask for the guy that's wearing the vest. You can get contracts from him, and you start to get different little things you can do where you can get money for launching different stuff, and you can oh my god, you can get different little contracts for you get money, and you can get science by doing little missions like launching a parachute. The other little random, get away from me.
So that's what's new in so that's what's new in Kerbal, huh?
That's goodbye, Beginner's Minute. It was swell. It was good.
I dare you to describe what I was doing.
No, I'm not. There's a good reason there's not a visual aspect to this show. And there never will be. Not as long as there's a... No.
So are you ready to retire Beginner's Minute?
We're like on a beginner's hiatus.
Yeah, we'll put it on break for a little while. You poor guy. You poor guy.
Oh, no.
This is from John from Minnesota.
Hi, John.
Hello, John. John says, what is the appropriate musical score for space travel and rocketry? Is it a sweeping orchestral piece that conveys the grandiosity of the cosmos, or should it be a kickin' rock and roll tune playing as your little capsule sits atop thousands of pounds of explosives? John from Minnesota can write. He says, I do think that Jebediah would prefer to be blown up while listening to Highway to Hell than some wafting violins. What do you think? What's the appropriate music?
Well, I don't think there's any better one-way ticket to midnight than some heavy metal, just riding a bunch of rockets. I think there are a lot of games that I play. Most of them are games that are in window, like FTL, or I did it with a couple others, like I did it with Nuclear Throne and some roguelikes.
Right.
You play it long enough, and the music starts to kind of run its course.
Right.
And you just, I want to keep playing the game, but I've heard, especially if there's not a very long track list, I've heard these songs over and over.
Right.
So I'll start to play my own music. And I'll find just certain things are just more fun to play with than others. I want something like fast-paced if I'm playing Risk of Rain, but if I'm playing something like FTL, it can kind of be whatever.
Right. I think the ultimate song that you could listen to while playing Kerbal is "Light My Fire." Come on, baby, light my fire.
So I have two bands that I listen to at different parts in the game. I listen to a couple other things, but these just have been the most fun. So in assembly, if I'm just in vehicle construction, I'll play Blockhead. He's kind of an electronic DJ, and if you don't like him the first time, give him one more listen. I swear he's great. And
we're doing a plug here, I think.
Yeah. So if
I smell a plug.
Whenever I'm in flight, the reason I listen to just electronic music when building is because I may be reading parts or trying to figure something out. So with somebody singing or anything, it's going to throw me off. Whenever I'm launching things, I'll do things with lyrics. And lately, the band I've been listening to is Diarrhea Planet. That is an actual band. The face you're making is amazing.
Diarrhea Planet.
Diarrhea Planet. They are the Andrew WK of garage rock. I swear it.
Okay, there's another reference right over my head. Explain. I'll tell you what. I'm going to borrow a term from Reddit. Explain to me like I'm 5 years old.
Loud rock band with 5 guitarists.
And a bad case of diarrhea.
A planet full of it.
Okay. And this is what you listen to while you launch?
Yeah, that's while I'm launching. You play some Diarrhea Planet, and you just listen to it. And
I bet they're all love songs too, right?
Oh yeah.
Uh-huh.
And you know what? Like, this is probably the closest they'll get to being mentioned on air. So you got to give it to them.
Diarrhea Planet. This is not the most original thing, but if I do listen to music, because a lot of times I like to just listen to the sound of the game. I like the rocket launch sounds. And
like you have the option to turn that down.
Yeah.
I just like how just stupid loud it is.
Yeah.
Like just flying.
But if I do listen to music, I tend to do things like I'll listen to the 2001 The Space Odyssey soundtrack.
Oh, that's good.
Especially when I'm trying to dock. And I've got the Blue Danube Waltz playing in the background. I'll also listen to the Planets, Holst. I'll dig up soundtracks. Like for example, there's a movie that I really enjoy. It's the remake, the George Clooney remake of Solaris, and the soundtrack it's one of those things that you can listen to for hours on repeat.
Yeah, and
not even realize you've done it. So that's the kind of music I tend to listen to a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, there are some soundtracks like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo soundtrack is another really good one.
That's Trent Reznor and Atticus. I can't remember the guy's name.
I believe so.
Yeah,
and on the Trent Reznor thing, there's also Social Networks.
Right.
Soundtrack is really good.
Yeah, and it's the same guy. And for the life of me, I can't remember the guy's name. It's Atticus something.
I don't know.
I'm gonna have to look it up.
Yeah.
This is driving me nuts. I'm going to have to look it up. You keep talking. I'm going to look.
There are a couple different soundtracks I'll do. Sometimes I'll do other games' soundtracks. If you're looking for something that, the Hotline Miami soundtrack is good for any occasion. Family gatherings, Christmas, whatever. If you like the 8-bit kind of stuff, Fantomenk, Fantomenk. He makes a lot of cool 8-bit, peppy kind of stuff. With the music I do, I kind of like faster, higher tempo stuff. And I either like my fast and my slow. So it's either all or nothing.
Atticus Ross. Atticus Ross, okay.
I knew it. I was just holding back.
The problem is that I've read To Kill a Mockingbird so many times. And every time I said Atticus...
Oh, Finch.
Yeah. Would stick in my brain. And I kept going, it's not Finch! But you know how you get that little war going in your brain?
Yeah,
it's like, I know that's not it. So get Finch, take Atticus Finch and put it over there and tell me what the other one is. It's Atticus Ross. We're sorry that we forgot your name. Yeah, I forgot it.
They're both really good soundtracks, even out of context of the movie. You just they're just really good to listen to.
That makes me wonder what playing Kerbal to the Downward Spiral would be like.
Oh,
Especially at the end, where you crash and then he starts singing "I Hurt Myself Today." It's like, well, that has a whole new meaning now.
Yeah.
I'm going to try that when I go home. I'm going to listen to Downward Spiral. Run Phil Run wrote in, and the story is called "The Floating Dead."
All right.
So you know there's zombies.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah. Here we go.
Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to read the story. Nos is going to do sound effects.
I guess I am.
Yes, you're going to be my sound effects man.
Okay.
Okay, you ready? All right.
Sure.
The Floating Dead. Jebediah Kerman savors the view out of his capsule's port side window. Another jewel rise over the oceans of Lathe. He suits up for EVA. Outside the capsule, Jeb steps out into the vast emptiness and gets to work configuring the mystery goo canister to run experiments. After the third solid whack on the side, the light turns green. The goo floats, glowing like a firefly in July. That's our first word, firefly. Pulsing in a slow, steady rhythm. Jeb gets as much of it in his hands as he could and shoves it into his suit's back pocket. He didn't even know the suits had back pockets. Awesome! As Jeb makes his way back to the hatch, he notices a shadow form behind him, and he turns in time to witness the mystery goo transform into a zombie cannibal copy of himself. Brains. That was our other word, by the way, cannibal. It attacks, and Jeb and his cannibal counterpart tumble about in space. Kicks and punches are useless against the goo, so Jeb engages his jetpack and makes a break for it. The two separate, and the cannibal drifts away, clawing and thrashing in a futile attempt to follow Jeb back to the ship. Newton's third law. It's super effective. Our hero maneuvers back to the ship's hatch and climbs inside. Safety at last. But not for long. A jolt puts the ship into a roll, throwing Jeb around the cabin. An alarm sounds, immersing the cabin with red flashing light and a deafening buzz. The ship's orbit is too low, and Lathe's atmosphere is causing rapid deceleration. Out the window, the horizon view burns red with flame. Struts creak under the load, and snap. The ship begins to disintegrate. That's disintegration? Okay. The command pod decouples, and emergency parachutes automatically deploy. Jeb watches as the remnants of the ship burst into flames. That was our last clue. And turn to ash in Lathe's blue skies. He has never before seen explosions so beautiful. The command pod lands with a thud in the soft sand. Jeb emerges and takes Kerbal's first steps on Jules' moon. The thermometer reads a comfortable negative 20 degrees Celsius, and there isn't a cloud in the sky. Alone in paradise, Jebediah kicks back and waits for KSP's next interplanetary mission. Rescue Jeb from Lathe. Anyway, thank you. That's from Run Phil Run. One of our longtime listeners and regular contributors, Amy K., has been having all kinds of problems with landers. And she was nice enough to send us an audio letter describing her misadventures with landing.
Hi guys, I thought I'd take this opportunity to write about my fail of the week, which is related to something I have a great deal of trouble with, landers. Please bear in mind that I play with fire and deadly re-entry when reading this, because I like the added realism and consideration, even though I know it makes things harder for myself. The other day, I decided to put my week of Googling and reading up on landers into practice and head for the Mun in an attempt to achieve two things: land upright and get home. Jebediah swallowed hard, pessimistic after witnessing my previous landings, updated his will and got into the rocket. He was reassured slightly, however, after seeing more fuel on this lander than on any other I'd previously launched. I had double the usual fuel, and my reading up on landers encouraged me to put radial engines on this one. I'd housed it in fairings, loaded it with plenty of sciencey goodness, and I was feeling really pretty darn good about this lander, truth be told. Now, I have a trouble with fuel when I land, so I launched the biggest rocket I had built to date and got into orbit without too much of an issue. I headed toward my Mun encounter with so much fuel left, I was confident enough to tell Jebediah that his family won't be needing to cash in on the death by Amy's cock-up compensation written into his contract this week. They usually cash in on this a few times a week, to be fair. I now wish I'd never made the arrangement, but lawyers on Kerbal aren't the brightest of sparks. So I approach my Mun encounter, get into a circular orbit, decouple my lander and make my first observation. I have too much fuel in the wrong place. My lander is full of fuel, yes, but the ship that brought me here has more. Much more. Oh well, we've landed on the Mun with less fuel before and we have more engines now. We'll be fine, Jeb, I think to myself and dismiss this issue. So we come in for the landing and I'm impressed by the manoeuvrability my radial engines give me as we reach cock-up number 2 and a self-induced smack in the face for me. I realise all too late that 4 times the amount of fuel plus 4 times the number of engines does not equal win. Okay, we can still do this, I tell Jeb as he starts looking at me with less and less optimism as we get down to 7 metres per second to land, and yes, we're going to be upright for once. Yes, yes, yes! Now, I'm convinced there is localised wind on the Mun. Everybody can tell me I'm wrong, and science can do the same thing, but the next word out of my mouth was no. And, as with almost every other landing I'd ever done, over we go onto our side. Oh well, we tried, and it's still a landing, so yay. Now, I've become an expert of getting back up into space through the roll until you hit a bump, bounce a bit upright, and throttle up your engines method, which works wonderfully with one engine, but now I have 4 radially mounted, it doesn't work so well due to the fact that it can't roll. Time for an F5 as I see this going a bit dodgy. So, let's see if I can just go across the ground and angle up. So throttle up, boom. Nope, F9. After a lot of fiddling with landing gears, Jeb going underneath them so they're on his head, then jumping being one of many things I tried, I finally get into a position where I can just about get off the surface and eventually into orbit. Let's just go home and be thankful we got this far and get off the surface, Jeb, I say as I hit F5, not wanting to repeat the torturous process of getting back off the surface without blowing up. Now, Kerbal life demands that the moment you hit F5 is the perfect time for you to notice that you have almost zero fuel. So I spend the next 30 minutes of real time trying to find any burn that can eventually get us home to Kerbin. I finally find my only option that will take all of our fuel and be an enormous aerobrake, with our apoapsis around the distance of the Mun, but it would put us under 50 kilometres at our periapsis. So we burn for it, hit it, and run out of fuel just as we go below 50 kilometres. We approach Kerbin for the first pass, and I watch in horror as we burn horribly, and I try to use my wits and turn the ship sideways to put up more resistance, take heat off the parachute, and maybe slow down a little more. This seems to work, and we are successful in our attempt to not explode as we head back out into space for our second pass. We come back into Kerbin's atmosphere, and we do the same again. Our third orbit is our last, as our luck no longer holds, and the ship breaks apart. Somehow the command module survives, and I watch the gauges as our ablative shielding rapidly drops as the G-force increases along with the heat of re-entry. We have barely anything in heat shielding remaining, but we finally drop below 20k. The forces and heat drop off, and I scream in joy that we did it. Jeb will live, and we have loads of science back after an almost entirely catastrophic mission. I just about finished congratulating myself and Jeb as we hit 5k altitude, and I deploy the parachute by pressing space to bring the traumatic mission to an end. Then I press space again to deploy the parachute. Then again I press space to deploy the chute. Nothing. I'm now panicking as I see no parachute and we are down to 3k, so I right click on the parachute to manually deploy to find that it won't. It hasn't blown up as it's still there, but it looks like it's already been deployed and the contents are missing. Could it have been deployed somewhere else and I just hadn't noticed? Or did it just fail? Can it just fail? There's no time to ponder as I desperately forget the science and try to keep Jeb alive. His best shot, also known as my only plan, is to jump out at about 750 metres and burn his RCS like his life depended on it, and coincidentally, it does. So, 750 metres approaches, he EVAs and burns, and he burns, and he slows, and he slows, and it's all in the hand of Kerbal fate now. I'm holding my breath and pushing as hard as I can on the shift key, as if the pressure I apply somehow equates to a little more power in Jeb's personal RCS. And as he slows towards the mortar, it looks like he might just make it, and Mrs. Kerman is coming by later to pick up Jeb's death by Amy's cock-up compensation, and I stare at the screen, heartbroken by an epic fail. So to sum up, my fail of the week shows that no matter what I do, I just can't build landers. So I would appreciate any help you or any other listener can give me specifically for building and using landers. What are your processes and considerations in your own landers? Homer to your mobile.
Okay, there you go. Again, that's Amy K, and she is asking for some help. With landers
in a very humorous way.
Actually, you know what? I know she'd probably scream if she. Well, obviously she's going to hear me say this, but it's like, don't help her so that she'll do the funny stories still. No, that's not what I asked.
The more she messes up, the more entertainment we get out of it.
The funnier it is. But I digress. This week we are going to focus on Apollo 15. This podcast is being recorded on the week of August the 4th, 2014, and this is the 43rd anniversary of Apollo 15. 43 years ago this week, Apollo 15 landed on the moon. They took off on July the 26th. They landed on July the 30th, and they were on the moon for 3 days. We're going to start, we have some audio from the mission, and we're going to start with the landing.
7% fuel.
Which ended up being a little bit rough.
15 at 1.
And there was a reason for that.
-1.
This is a quote from A Man on the Moon, written by Andrew Chaikin.
10 feet, -1.
He says that the lunar module, which was known as the Falcon, was several thousand pounds heavier than previous landers.
8 feet, -1.
And so Falcon fell to the moon with a firm thud
Contact.
that rattled every piece of gear in the cabin and brought an exclamation of surprise from Irwin.
Bam.
The ship pitched backwards slightly and then tipped to one side.
Okay, Houston, the Falcon is on the plane at Hadley. Roger, Roger, Falcon.
Turns out that when they landed, it was on a little bit of an incline, and one of the pads had sunk into an impact crater, a very shallow impact crater.
Oh, so it was like
off
kilter in 2 ways.
Yeah, it was a little off kilter. The mission control jokingly referred to it as Leaning Tower of Pisa.
I think I've had more extreme reactions whenever I've landed. I was like, man,
man.
I don't know if mine would have made it back to Houston. What I would probably said.
Yeah,
so
mine wouldn't have been family friendly.
I watched the documentary by NASA, In the Mountains of the Moon.
Right.
It was out in 1971, and it's on YouTube. You just look it up and you can find it. And so I was watching them go through the landing.
Do you know
part.
that the entire broadcast of all of their EVAs you can watch on YouTube?
Oh, really?
Yeah, like all several hours worth. If you want
wow!
to.
No, I didn't look for those. I just
you got like the greatest hits highlights. version.
Yeah. It was a I was afraid it was going to be like super dated or anything like that, and it was like a fun thing to watch. It was like 30 minutes, and so it was crazy because they compacted all of the later planned things into one, and so I think that this had more mishaps because they were putting so many eggs in this one basket.
Yeah, and a lot of those eggs, that was the first time they were serving them too.
Yeah. So they didn't know what was going to go on, and it was like the first day they go out and they got their rover and they go out and they hop in, and it's supposed to be all-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive,
right?
And the front-wheel drive doesn't work. And so they're like, oh, and
they had to steer with the rear.
Yeah,
wheel.
It's rear wheel drive.
Yeah,
and they said it really didn't affect much, and it was like oh, it's still okay.
Yeah,
and I mean, you don't need as much traction,
sure,
but you think that they talk about it being a bumpy ride, and a thought that came up is like, well, the gravity's lower. But the gravity makes you more sensitive to, like you push somebody in lower gravity, they're going to fly farther.
Well, I read somewhere one of the guys said that if they hit even the slightest bump, I mean, the lunar rover would literally lift off the ground and float briefly.
Yeah.
And, one of the guys said, I hate seatbelts, but I wore them on that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he'd be like laying on the ground next to it.
It's funny because I could see the hate seatbelts comment because it was in the 70s. So you have like those big muscle cars and bench seats and stuff. So you didn't want to, if you've ever sat in one of those, the seatbelts aren't fun.
Well, the documentary that you watched, did they talk about the Genesis rock?
Yeah.
Okay.
They showed a couple of clips of it, and they were talking like
the Apollo 15 mission, and I mean they were all of the missions were geologically significant, but one of the most significant geological finds came on the second EVA. As I said, Apollo 15 was on the moon for 3 days, and they did 3 EVAs.
Yeah, which is nuts. I mean, imagine like all right, well, you go to sleep and you wake up and
you're on the moon.
And you're on the moon.
Yeah,
you know, it's like if anything is like pinch me, I'm dreaming. It's like no, you just woke up and you're on the moon.
Yeah,
you know.
The astronauts had gone through very extensive geological training. The idea wasn't to make them geologists; it was to make them trained eyes. And one of the things that they were looking for was called a northosite, and the area that they were in was an impact basin, and the geologists had hoped that some of the deep crust material had been ejected due to the earlier impact.
Oh yeah,
and so what they were looking for primordial material, and the Genesis rock. Like I said, approximately 4.5 billion years old. It formed during a time when the outer layers of the moon was molten magma. And as it cooled, this rock formed. They had found similar rocks, but this was the largest one they found.
Oh, man, look at that. Look at the lamp. Almost see twinning in there. Guess what we just found? Guess what we just found? I think we found what we came for. Crystal and rock, huh? Yes, sir. You better believe it. Yep, sir. Pledge in there. Almost all pledge. She likes it. As a matter of fact, oh boy, I think we might have ourselves something close to the northosite. Because it's crystalline in there. It's just a bunch of, it's just almost all pledge. What a beaut. That is really a beauty, and there's another one down there. Yeah, we'll get some of these. Bag it up.
Okay, now what you can't hear in that recording, the geologists in the back room at this point were just going bonkers.
Yeah, they were losing it.
Yeah, because they were like, "Woo, they found it!
All right, bring it home!" You know.
I like that last comment. He goes, "Yeah, bag it up."
Whenever I was watching it and just hearing him talk about it,
right?
It's crazy how much context means, you know, because if you were to hear all of these same things, like a bunch of guys excited about a rock,
right?
You're like, all right, you know, but they're on another, you know, another orbiting body,
another world,
It's like then they find this rock and they're like, woo, you know, like it's funny how something that simple in a different context is a huge discovery.
Well, you haven't seen the HBO miniseries From the Earth to the Moon, right? Okay. They have the actor that's playing, I believe, Dave Scott, makes the comment, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing, he says something to the effect of, all my life I wanted to be a test pilot and fly planes. And now the most significant thing I will have done, and I think he said the achievement that he was most proud of was he found that rock.
Yeah, and anyone else can say, "Oh, I found a rock," and you're like, "Oh, I found a rock on the moon."
Right.
Oh,
yeah. Now, the documentary you watched, did they do the hammer and the feather?
Yeah, they showed that.
Okay, talk about that.
Okay, so I like the introduction to it. Like they set up a camera, and I think they said they'd done this experiment before, but they had.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought, okay.
Yeah, they
gave it a test run,
or done an experiment like yeah, and they wanted to.
We want to make sure this is right.
This one was documented more than the previous space missions had, so like the public are seeing a lot of things. And anytime we've sent anyone up to the ISS, like whenever we first had the ISS. They would show things like, "Oh, this is what water does," or "This is what we eat." Just little things like that because it just gets your attention. And so you see him standing in front of the rover, the camera being held, or not the rover, but the lander,
right?
And he's like, "Well, there was once this guy named Galileo," and he starts to tell you about gravity and if the feather and a hammer are dropped without with just gravity being the only factor, they'll fall at the same speed.
Yeah, and they'll hit the ground at the same time.
Yeah, and they'll hit the ground at the same time. It's just, air resistance and, atmosphere that change those things. And so he he said, so we're going to test it out. And, he just lets go of both, and they fall at the same speed, hit at the same time.
Well, in my left hand, I have a feather. In my right hand, a hammer. And I guess one of the reasons we got here today was because of a gentleman named Galileo a long time ago, who made a rather significant discovery about falling objects in gravity fields. And we thought that where would be a better place to confirm his findings than on the moon. And so we thought we'd try it here for you. The feather happens to be appropriately a falcon feather for our falcon. And I'll drop the two of them here, and hopefully they'll hit the ground at the same time. How about that? It proves that Mr. Galileo was correct in his findings.
Okay, so they had their famous demonstration of science right there on the moon, and at that point, they were supposed to pack up and go home.
Yeah.
But there was something very personal that they wanted to attend to. Houston had asked Commander Dave Scott to drive the rover by himself over to a small hill that was about 300 feet away. And the reasoning was there was an attached video camera on the back of the rover. They wanted to get video footage of the limb actually leaving the lunar surface.
I'm driving, Joe. Sorry about that.
Okay, fine. A couple of requests when you get there. We'd like for you to report on possible dust condition on the battery mirrors. And we'd also like for you to tap the amp-hour meters just to see if the readings change.
Joe, wait. Joe, stand by. Break. Hey, Joe, wait till I get there, will you please? I got to concentrate on driving right now.
Roger.
And at this point, the camera on the rover had been shut off because it was overheating, and Houston wanted to give it a chance to cool.
Dave, we'd like for you to align the high gain per the checklist procedures, but we're standing by for your readings on how possible you think that is because of the dim intensity of the Earth.
Unseen by Houston, Commander Dave Scott parked the rover. He put a small red Bible on the instrument panel of the rover.
Dave, do you read Houston?
Then he walked about 20 feet away, where he found a small depression in the ground, and there he placed a plaque.
Hadley Base, do you read Houston?
And on the plaque, in alphabetical order, were 14 names, and these were people that had lost their lives in the space program, and that included 3 cosmonauts from Soyuz 11.
Yeah.
He also placed a small aluminum figure, which was representative of a fallen astronaut.
Hadley Base, do you read Houston?
As you can hear, Houston didn't know what he was doing.
Yeah, now bye-bye, Joe.
Okay.
The figure, it's a very, it's
They
just,
commissioned an artist and everything for that.
Yeah, it was just this metal figure, and it kind of just looks like a generic human form,
Mm-hmm.
It didn't look like the spacesuit or anything.
Right.
It was just the form of a human.
Right.
And
bipedal human.
Yeah, and then there was this plaque, and with the moon, it's not going to go anywhere, and weather's not going to cover it up. It's kind of like wasn't there an astronaut that wrote his initials in the dirt?
Yeah, he wrote his
daughter's initials.
His daughter's, yeah.
Yeah, and it's it's up there forever. You know? So the plaque they just put on the ground, and I think they stuck it into the soil so it was standing upright.
I'd have to do some looking to remember who, but somebody left a picture, like a family photo or something.
Yeah.
In a sleeve.
Uh-huh.
But all that stuff is up there.
Yeah.
All those footprints are there, undisturbed. All that equipment. It's amazing to me to think that someday we're going to revisit those landing sites.
Yeah, and it's just we're going to see these, dusty little things just sitting all over the place.
But anyway, 43 years ago this week, Apollo 15. Well, I guess that wraps it up for But I Digress, and so we move on now. There are some folks that we want to thank, as always. We do want to thank our listeners, number one, and that includes our regular contributors as well.
We want to thank the subreddit moderators,
Kerbal Space Program, and also Kerbal Academy. They have a link to us on their front page.
And all the music you heard is by Professor Soap. You can find him at facebook.com/Professor Soap.
And don't forget, if you would like to get in contact with us, we do have an email address,
kerbalpodcast@gmail.com.
And you can get us on Twitter,
@Kerbalcast.
I am your LMP, that's Lunar Module Pilot, Biff Aldrin, and our CMP, Command Module Pilot,
Nostromo.
Until next time,
happy Kerbaling! engineer.
I have a letter here that references. We read your letter. We read your letter.
That could be in every outtake.
They landed. I have no idea when they landed. They entered orbit around. No. And then they returned on August the 2nd. No, that's not right. I'm tying myself up in all these dates.
And thanks, Doc. And then the door closed.
I feel so much better.
A day in the life of a Kerbal psychologist.
How was your day, dear?
Oh, same as always. My spacecraft broke apart in the atmosphere, and I'm redoing it. I reverted, and everything was fine. Oh, same as always. My spacecraft...
How was your day, dear?
Oh, same as always. My spacecraft broke apart in the atmosphere.
Coming up in today's program... We're just speaking in vowels now.
Man.
Nostromo's having a vowel movement.
Oh, same as always. My descent... Oh, same as always. My descent...
You can follow us on Twitter at Kerbalcast and... Crap. Oh boy, we're off to a bad start.
Another episode of As the Kerbin Turns.
I blew it. We're supposed to say that at the same time, right? Hello, dear. How was your day?
Oh, same as always. The onboard computer went crazy. No, it didn't. We're fine.
No, it didn't.
I don't have any problems.
That was a great day.
Oh, same as always. The onboard... You spit into the mic. Oh, same as always.
Sorry.
You might have... Yeah.
And not so much of a pause between crazy and I got sucked.
Okay.
That's not what I meant.
We have letters from you guys.
Thank everybody who listens to this podcast and download we would like to thank everybody who can speak properly, which does not include me.
None of the daily physical demands required. Researchers observed elevated levels of insulin and other blood-related factors in the 4 astronauts, though none have diabetes
Do you want me to read this?
No, I'm going to do this.
You've set your mind to it.
Should I just restart it, the whole thing? Oh, same as always. We landed on an alien planet and a Xenomurphy Brown. I'm back from outer space. I just found you here with that sad look upon your face.
More singing. Oh, God.
What do you know?
What do you know?
What do you know?
Holy crap.
Hey! And now it's time for our crew report where we hear from our viewers. And we're going to...
Our viewers?
Our viewers.
People can see us?
With their ears. Their earballs. If they could see us, we would not have
no listenership.
Yeah.
We'll also read our letters, your letters. We'll read somebody's letters.
Forget your letters. It's all our letters.
It's our letters.
I write the best fan mail.
We fake the letters. Coming up in today's program, we'll no idea.
It's now time for the crew report, where we read where your letters are read. It's now time for the My funding ran low, so I took plutonium from some terrorists, and now I'm... Are we recording now?
Yeah, we're recording.
Okay. Everything's hectic in here. We're all just yelling.
I can't work under these conditions.
I don't know what's going on anymore.